Mhm. Okay, we are live. So, hi everyone. We'll be discussing Jordan B. Peterson lecture number 6 of Maps of Meaning, as well as lecture number 6 of the biblical series, which is the psychology of the flood. So, I think mostly we'll be covering biblical lecture 6. Uh, if anyone joins who has worked on the Maps of Meaning lecture 6, they can add that as well. So I'll let Netha start the discussion.
Mm-hmm. Um, yeah, okay. So um, we talked about. I have two things, so I'm thinking about which thing I will mention first. Um, yeah, okay. Uh, so we talked about yesterday that there are when you decide on a goal, then there are three categories, and there are obstacles, tools, and irrelevant things. So and then we discussed what what to do uh, if something important might hide in the irrelevant category. So one option could be to just explore this category, like what you deem irrelevant. Is it really irrelevant? Um, but there are so many irrelevant things, so it's difficult to know what could be relevant. So another thing to do could be to redefine your goal, because I think that people often fail to define their goals well enough. Uh, and the problem with that is then there are fewer things in the two first categories, obstacles and tools, because you don't really know uh, what could be an obstacle or a tool. So, um, but it might also be the case that your goal is good, uh, but the way uh, your plan of how to reach that goal is unclear or just wrong, or there are other better options. So if you feel like you're stuck and don't know how to reach your goal, or that some uh, thing might be missing, then you can uh, make your goal clearer or think of other ways to get there. So yeah, that was something interesting that we discussed. So any comments about that?
Nope, not right now.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, then you can say something that you found interesting in the discussions.
I learned a lot in this discussion. So let me pull up the notes. So one of the things we learned was how to sort out your relationships. And the one thing I liked most was uh, sort out your interactions with the other person. For example, if you let's just say you have a kid and you only get to spend like 30 minutes with that kid every day, and many a times we fight over trivial things, and we take things too personally, we get hurt and stuff like that. But if you look at it in terms of the bigger picture, like those are the only 30 minutes you have every day to spend with this very important person. So it's about uh, making that interaction the best interaction you can over time. So I think that was a really powerful idea. Or if you are married,
Mm.
like just before you leave for office, the interaction you have with your partner. So rather than it be the default interaction that it is, which might not be the best way of doing it. So if you can discuss that and make it better, so that would be great. So another thing was about um, make a list of things that needs to be done in a relationship, and then start negotiating as to who will do them and when, and things like that. So and the reason that is so important is because once you start that discussion, it's your prefrontal cortex, which is involved in a lot of those discussions. So when those issues come up in practice, if you didn't discuss them, your primitive biology will just get triggered, and you might feel resentful, you might feel angry, you might say, hey, why do I have to take out the trash today, something like that. So and that can those negative things can build over time, as opposed to if you have already discussed that it's your responsibility to take the garbage out for, like, suppose this week, then it's difficult to feel resentful or angry at your partner. You might feel guilty, or like maybe incompetent if you don't do it. Uh, right. So that was really interesting. Um,
Mm. Yeah, I have something connected to that that we didn't discuss yesterday, but I thought about it because um, it seems like people want to avoid doing that, like making their wishes and demands in a relationship clear enough. Uh, so I thought about that, like why why do people avoid doing that? What do you think? You're
uh,
muted.
Sorry. I can't say why they do that. Like uh,
Do
I'm
you know people like that, or are you?
I have a friend who I gave him this idea that, and I think I spoke about this earlier as well. I gave him this idea that he's always complaining about his relationship and the issues he's having with his girlfriend. And I told him that, this wouldn't happen if you, let's just say, every month had a discussion with her about. It's the same discussion many software companies have after a particular software engineering, like software coding iteration is done. They'll talk about what went wrong, what went right, where everyone is, what's the plan for the future. And I was wondering, hey, maybe you can do that for the relationships in your life. And he and his wife just wouldn't do that. Like, I can only give them the suggestion, it's up to them whether they want
Mm,
to implement it or not. And uh, I couldn't say. I can only guess. Uh, I feel like it's the same thing, or the attitude people have about you can discuss anything you like, as long as it doesn't have any meaning. That's the because meaning is hard, or it's the same thing. You can talk about anything as long as it's not really something that is requires a lot of mental energy. Like, let's not talk about rape or crime. So people avoid that topic, or at least that's been my experience.
mm-hmm, mm,
So it's the same thing, because if you are going to have that experience with your partner, where you are really going to discuss things and talk about the truth, then that's like exposing yourself. Like, he has certain dreams, and he feels very up and down, some very incompetent uh, about his ability to achieve those dreams, and he's really vulnerable there. And he just doesn't want to share that side of himself with his wife. uh, uh, he has some fear of judgment. He just cannot be open with her. So
mm,
that was the sense I got as to, and it's a really hard thing to do. Uh, I feel like it's part of the same cultural thing that we discussed about, like I was saying before. being shallow, and people just want to have fun, see funny things and stuff like that. That's just the what frustrates me about people that I meet. Like, only rarely I'll find someone who is seriously wants to discuss things. uh,
Mm.
I feel like people just want to troll, and this is a serious domain. uh, Other reason would be, say that people don't have strong reasons to do this. Like, things are working,
Ah.
sometimes they don't work, but they just don't feel the need for doing something like this. They aren't, it's a lack of imagination on their part as to how better things could be,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
try to strive for that, rather than this, okay, things are going, that's okay. So
Mm.
so I would say that that is also part of it.
Mm. Yeah. They don't really expect it to be better because the relationships they see around them might be just as bad, or it's not that bad. Um, while I think of it that as if you have one fight where you're angry at the other person, then that's uh, like unnecessary. Even that is unnecessary, um, because it's yeah, because it could be solved in another way. So yeah, so good points. um, I also think that um, sometimes people expect to get a better deal if they don't negotiate. So if they think that if I just complain when I think I'm doing too much, then I won't have to do as much, and then it will be better for me than if we really sit down and negotiate how much I should do. So I think that's part of it also for some people, that they expect to be able to negotiate better if they don't do it explicitly.
I'm not able to understand, like, if you're not explicitly negotiating, how does
Yeah,
that
it's
like
just like things just happen. Like you avoid cleaning um, the bathroom, and then you just wait until the other person gets frustrated and cleans it, and then you think, oh yeah, I didn't have to do it, so that's good for me. So people think like that instead of so they get away with doing less, or they think that they will get away with doing less, but instead they often just feel like they do uh, too much, more than they should do, and then they're not happy about that. So I think that's the result, but people expect to get a better deal um, if they just let things happen and see how it works out, instead of negotiating.
I
I'm
have
just going to close the door.
okay.
Yeah, you can talk.
I have some experience around that. Like, let me put it this way. Let's just say you are very industrious and you like doing things, you like working, and when you are like living with someone who is not that way, so you are always on the losing end of the deal, because you will be the one who will be cleaning the dishes, because other people can just let them stay that way until there are like worms coming out of the dishes, because they are so like been there for a week. Yeah, so that's and that's like, if you have to live that way for like 30 years with someone, that's like hell.
Mm,
uh, and yeah, and people are projecting, like their best side or something, there is so much deception, so it's difficult to tell what they will do after for example, getting married. So uh,
Mm,
so that's yeah, that's a really difficult thing.
mm, yeah. And people often think of uh, think of the relationship uh, as something like that they should get something out of, and of course you want to get something out of a relationship, otherwise it's not a very good relationship. But it's the result isn't as good as if you both would just think of what is good for the relationship. So your goal is to have a good relationship, not to get the best deal out of the relationship yourself. So I think that's something that I wish more people would do in their relationships. Just think of what is the best way to act for the relationship, not just for me.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think I agree with that.
Mm, mm,
The issue happens like when you actually have some goals or some long term objectives you want to meet, and then it's very important for your psychological health to pursue that. Otherwise everything falls apart for you. But then you also have to take the time out for the relationship.
mm.
uh,
And
so
your well being is important to the relationship as well. So it's not like you can just ignore yourself and your needs because you are part of the relationship. So it also benefits you in that way.
yeah, it's just that if you are a very purposeful person, then you have got like three full-time jobs. One is your job, then the relationship, then you're pursuing your purpose. As opposed to if you're not very purposeful, you're fine with just going through the motions day by day and just live your life that way. Then you only have two full-time jobs. Then so that's the struggle of being ambitious and still having relationships, because in the later part that taking care of that ambition is equally important for your psychological health as it is taking
Mm,
care of that
mm,
relationship. And I have seen some, at least with a friend of mine, who is just like totally killed by the relationship, because
mm,
his girlfriend, his wife, now wife, is always pulling him into this all kinds of activities that she just wouldn't do alone. And he just doesn't get the time and for himself. So uh,
mm. Yeah, that's also some, like you can negotiate what you want the relationship to look like. So uh, or you have to think about that before I think you get into a relationship with the person, um, to make sure that it's the type of relationship that works for you.
but it is
Like
so
for instance,
strange.
finding someone who also has this need for a purpose, or someone who has the same interests or something like that.
Yeah, if you could find that, then that's just great. uh,
Yeah.
mm. So but like it's such a difficult problem, like at least from what I've seen in my country, many women pretend to have purpose and all that because they think that makes them more attractive to certain kind of men. And I have this friend who is much more socially intelligent than I am, and he told me, oh, you do realize that whole thing was like deception and stuff. And uh, and I was like, how do you know that? Then he told me how he decodes these things. And So
Okay, how?
that he just goes there and talk to that person and ask them questions, and he doesn't judge them. He You cannot tell anything from the face. He'll just keep inquiring, keep asking questions, and then he will come back and say that if this person was really serious, uh, this is the thing that they would be doing, but
Mm-hmm.
instead of that,
Mm-hmm.
this is what they are doing. So he's able to tell that way. Apart from that, he's got this skill that he just for example, while dealing with people, he will know like when to smile, how to position his body, how to what to say, all that. So he's incredibly smart that way.
Mm-hmm.
uh, okay, so but yeah, back to our original thing. It does sound so simple that you can just talk about things. uh, like if you have a problem, you can just discuss that problem, and uh, even just discussing it tends to improve things a bit, even though you cannot come up with a final solution just yet. But it's strange how people even fail to do that. uh, it sounds
Mm-hmm.
incredibly simple, but yeah. So what was your other takeaway?
No, that was my other. The you just you started talking about it, and that's why I jumped in because it was my other point.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then I guess I'll move on to my other one of my other takeaways.
Mm?
So this we discussed earlier the lecture number fourth, and that lecture was just very dense in the learning on the learning side, and I feel the same way about this lecture. It was uh, very dense. He really went somewhere in this lecture. So okay, I guess I'll cover them one by one. The first thing is sometimes no matter what you do, you are in trouble. So once you realize that, it kind of liberates you and allows you to move forward, um, as opposed to getting stuck and trying to figure out a perfect solution for that particular problem when there might not be a perfect solution. So you voluntarily accept the less perfect solution and you move forward. So that was very powerful. uh, so that does kind of put you in a better state to deal with the reality, because uh, I doubt if I'm ever in a situation where there is a like more perfect solution. Like it's either a bad solution or a lesser bad solution, and even lesser bad solution than that. So something like that. uh, okay, so that was one of my takeaways. So the next one is the world is enormously complex, and how do you deal with the complexity? So even a simple problem like what should you be spending your next hour doing is enormously complicated, because there are so many things to do. How would you even know which one is the right thing? So even a simple decision like that is enormously complicated. So but we look at people around you; they seem to be, I guess, not dying. I mean, things seem to work. So he first talked about how your body is the first line of defense when it comes to dealing with the chaos, because you are experiencing the world through your body in a certain way that allows you to make sense of it and come up with narratives and stories. And the second one is the social structure. For example, I'm in my home right now, and the internet just seems to work, the light just seems to work, and if I pick up the phone, I can order things, and that also seems to work. And when I go out and sit in a bus or a train, people are not attacking me or trying to kill me. So we just assume, we just take so many things for granted. And I was recently traveling to a different part of the country. I had shared this with you earlier, and there was a lot of like violent people, violence there, people who have no respect for other people, and it was really hard for me to sit there and ignore everything else in my environment and just maybe study my book. Let's just say if I'm in a much better place, so I can just sit on that train for like next 3 hours, ignore everything else, just study my book. The person next to me is not going to kill me or something like that. So I had a first hand experience where you become hyper vigilant, like you cannot take the environment, social environment around you for granted. Uh, because I was traveling 2 times, and 2 times I saw like two incidents, says, and I had to get involved. So that was very strange. Like you cannot even trust. You have to be vigilant about the environment, so you cannot just ignore it. And that's so cool about having a good social structure, that you can just ignore so many things, take them for granted, and just focus on your objectives. But there is a downside of that, which was, yes, culture does help you keep the chaos under control, but we are also supposed to keep the culture under control, because it can become so tyrannical. And that is certainly true, because if you look at many policies, like they are just designed, or even the culture, like I was saying before, there seems to be kind of a conspiracy where you are always supposed to, like, happiness conspiracy, I call it. Like you are always supposed to project an happy image. You are happy, you are fulfilled. You are not supposed to admit that you are full of shit. uh, Even though recently I've experienced admitting that, and working through that with the people you trust is can actually be useful. But somehow you just cannot have that kind of interaction with people in general. So uh, that is so hard, and the expectations that people put on you, where uh, if you deviate even slightly from the group, boy, that they can just like censor you, or start opposing you or something like that. And that's what I had experienced when I was visiting my parents. Like I was wearing shorts, and these people were like, hey, you cannot wear those kind of clothes in our society, something like that. So so I'm a male, they wouldn't let me wear what I want to wear. And women wearing uh, skirts or something like that, that's like totally out of the question. So uh, and I asked them, why do you want to control uh, me? They said, that's our culture, like that's our society, we don't permit that around here. And I'm like, okay. So it can, and yes, it's up to the individual to fight it, and like oppose it. uh, so that can happen. uh, okay, so I guess we got 30 more minutes.
Yeah, but yeah, I could. Well, I don't know if I have something to say about this, but I found it very interesting from the lecture. Um, just this that you're talking about, that societies demand that you conform to the rules, the social rules or other rules, and um, it's up to you to make sure that you don't sacrifice more to the group than you should. Um, uh, and if you become resentful of other people, that's a sign that you're sacrificing too much. Um, and I, yeah, I've. This is something that I've experienced a lot when I was young, just exactly this. So it's exactly this, that I thought that the group, like my peers, uh, demanded that I had to sacrifice too much to be accepted, and I valued my own um, individual individuality. Well, my and I didn't want to conform because I didn't see the point of it. So, and it took me a long time to realize like why it would be good to be able to function together with other people because I wasn't ready to sacrifice that much, but I was really resentful of other people, like all other people. So it's something that I think that like children need to know. Children need to understand this, and maybe they do um unconsciously. Well, in some way they understand this, um, but I think it's good to talk about. And if you could figure out how to talk with children about this, I think it would help a lot of children who don't know how much to sacrifice, because I think that many children sacrifice too much, so they lose everything that uh, that they uh, that's unique about them, uh, that they could bring make into something useful to give other people something useful. So yeah, yeah, I found this idea very interesting. So
That is
that's
exactly
my
right.
comment about that.
That is exactly right. That is exactly right. Because I was I was going to add this next. It's good. It's good that you pardon me. I can now just jump into it and complete what you are saying. So, why in your right mind, like you wouldn't want to do things that the group is doing and what they are thinking? Why would you want to do it any other way? You must have some unique perspective, or you must see something that is important to you enough that you are willing to take this course that is like risky because it deviates from the default path, which is safer. So why would you want to do something like that? uh, and Because you have something to contribute, you want to like experiment with this thing. So that's like you are confronting the chaos in that way. uh, right. And
Mm,
now if you have a culture which is so tyrannical, that's like it will just not be able to change itself and fix itself. And This is about like in a way about immigration, because uh, many people wanted to, including me, and even now wants to go to the west because their own countries, their own culture just wouldn't support what they were doing. They just like wouldn't be accepted there, and they had ideas, they wanted to contribute. So uh, they wanted to go to the west and do their thing and contribute and just pursue that thing without people pulling them down all the time just because they are doing it differently. Now that and When I was in California, it was so cool. Like you could be yourself. You People wouldn't like poke you and question you and try to control you. Uh, that's the way I felt. So I think it was great. Even though now with all this Google business and all this political correctness, some people wouldn't agree with that. But I didn't see that. When I was there,
mm,
to me it
mm,
was like so cool, accepting, and you could be yourself, and people wouldn't unnecessarily question you. They'll just leave you alone to do your thing.
mm.
I found that very very useful.
Yeah.
So, and if you build a culture like that, then all these uh, innovators or artist types will tend to gravitate towards your model, because over there they can pursue what they want to pursue without having a great deal of social cost. So I think that's just great.
Mm.
Um,
Mm.
so I think we lose out a lot when we try to uh, make people conform to our established group societal like norms.
Mm.
Uh,
Yeah, but there's also a point with doing that. So you need to find a balance because, you know, in Maps of Meaning, Peterson talks a lot about this, the function of culture, like the function of norms. That if you know how to act and how other people will act, and there's less chaos. You know what will yeah, you know what to expect. So there's also something good about that. But it if it's too tyrannical, then it's not good.
in this context, that's a very important point you made. But in this context, it does not necessarily come up, and it comes up at the same time, because uh, uh, let me put it this way: it's about sharing not everything, sharing most of the premises about how you should behave with your peers. For
Yeah.
example, when I was talking to John or maybe other people, I don't necessarily disagree with them in terms of the values about how we should behave and treat others.
Mm, mm,
And then there is a part of, while accept all that cultural part, there is a part of it that I want to explore, and I want to move in that direction. The problem
mm.
happens when uh, so that's what I meant about innovators going from one part of the world to another part of the world where they are more accepted. So they would want to assimilate and be part of that culture, because that's the culture that permits them to uh, grow like they can't grow anywhere else in the world. So you share that, and then there is a part of it that you push. So it's more integrated. I think the problem happens and has been happening when the people who are migrating do not share the fundamental values of the place to which they are migrating.
Well, I don't think we need to talk about immigration because it's the same uh, like if it's in the same society that you grew up in. It's the same issue. Like you are too different, or you're more different than your society accepts. Because you can be different even if you have lived in the same society your whole life. And I don't think it's only these fundamental values. I think it can be other things which aren't accepted.
I don't have much experience of actually living in the uh, West, in terms of how people complain about we are not accepted and stuff like that. To me, it seems much more accepting than the kind of people I get to deal with on a daily basis.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, I have never understood that part of uh, people in the West, like with so many things where they complain about things, and I'm like, what? Like, to I don't know. To
Yeah,
me,
in comparison with other societies, of course, Western societies might be more accepting of differences. Um, but I think that you can find the same issues in all societies. That some people are too different uh, for uh, for the society, or the society deems them to be more um, to be too different. So yeah, and that's something like if the society is too accepting of differences, then no one knows how to act, and no one knows what to expect of other people. So that's like, okay, let me take an example. Like I don't know, how is it um, in your country when people are waiting for, like, to get into a bus, for instance, do they stand in a line, like
Oh, in my
and wait for their
country,
turn?
no, 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 no.
No.
No, people just
Mm.
like total chaos. People just like try to get into that small door at the same time, and I have never been in a situation where I will not get pushed by someone else while getting onto the
Okay,
bus. Yeah.
okay. So
Hmm.
that's something that Swedes are famous for. That we all stand in a line and wait for a turn. That's a very Swedish thing to do. So, and that's if someone doesn't do that, if someone just comes in and tries to get in front of other people in the line, then people get really angry with that person. So that's something, that person is then too different. Do you see my point?
Oh man, that is a great point. Yes, I totally agree with that. Yes, yes,
So there are
yeah.
always
Hmm.
things that always ways that people can be too different, and things that societies don't accept, and that's good. Like I like that about Sweden, that I know that if I uh, stand in a line, then no one will try to get in front of me. So that's something positive. So, and there are a lot of things like that. So if you say that, oh no, you can do whatever you want, then that would be worse. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree with that. I think in that sense we do need group to censor people. Uh,
Yeah,
yeah,
well, yeah.
yeah. Because I can totally imagine my life. For example, in Sweden, let's just say I'm waiting for the bus. I can just be reading the Kindle all the way back until I get into the bus, uh, as opposed to because that's the way. At least I think that you optimize everything that you do. Like uh, if you already have a full-time job and you want to do other things, and life, like Peterson said, is enormously complex, so you want to make the best out of every single minute. And I think when you have a more orderly society, uh, you can just ignore, like I was saying before, your environment and just focus on what you want to focus on. Like
Mm,
in
mm,
California, I can probably still be reading my book as I'm crossing the road, because people follow the law and they
mm,
stop and they will not run over you. But in
mm.
India, I cannot do that. Uh, so just to be
Yeah.
able to uh, uh, take your environment for granted, and so that is so cool. Yes,
Mm, mm,
yes. So yes, this tyrannical aspect. I mean, in a way, it's like that dragon which protects the things that are important. So it sounds like the same thing. Like if someone is breaking through the queue and disrupting things and like trying to hurt people, then the social dragon has to in a way take that person out. So that's very useful. Yes, that's very useful.
Mm, mm. Yeah.
Did we
Yeah.
pause?
Mm?
So the next thing we spoke about, uh, or the Peterson spoke about, was routines, the importance of repeated things that we do every day. So according to him, they're like 70% of our life,
Mm, mm.
and they might be 80 or even like 90. So uh, if you spend a couple of hours traveling, then there are people that I know who only come back home. They have to travel for like 3 4 hours. So they only come back home to just like have dinner and just go to sleep.
Mm,
Then
mm.
next day their routine starts again. Uh, so if you are going to live life in that 70 80 90%, then you may want to think about making the best out of them rather than just treating them as trivial things.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
then he gets into the red queen problem, or just to summarize it in a sentence, when the Alice falls down this, uh, they call it the rabbit hole, then this queen says, "In my kingdom, you have to run as fast as you can just to stay in the same place." So people who are like autistic, or maybe people who have OCDs, or people who aspire to do things, aspire to have careers and jobs that are beyond their current skills, or beyond their like IQ, like Peterson says, it cannot be changed. Uh, so I think a lot of them can relate to this. Like when other people are just navigating through this complexity, you have to like do everything you can, just to like survive. And then you are not just supposed to survive, you are also supposed to go forward. So uh, it can uh, it can be enormous work every day, for a lot of people uh,
Mm,
around the
mm.
world. So um, and I can also relate to that personally, because I've seen people have fun, go to movies, do all these things, and I was like, how can they afford to do that? uh, so yes. So this week we are coming up with a new feature called exercises. So out of Peterson's lecture, we take out important exercises that you can do to improve your life. So the first one is, make a list of things that you are currently ignoring that you shouldn't. For example, I've been ignoring my taxes, and I
Mm,
have been ignoring certain savings account I have. I have no idea when it's gonna mature, and how to transfer that into my account, and when I have to pay the yearly premiums. So I just been ignoring that for a long time, and I had no idea about how to save on taxes, and all the receipts I'm supposed to keep. So that's just I've been ignoring for a long time. So uh, and financial literacy, I've been ignoring that as well. Uh, so that's a very vital thing, um, because money is the thing that makes things run. So you may want to be like more intelligent about it. So uh, and now select the most vital ones and start working on them bit by bit. And another advice was narrow down and be very specific about the problem, rather than, this goes back to your earlier point, right? uh,
mm, mm. Yeah.
okay, so and the rationale for making a list of things that you are ignoring that you shouldn't is, he talks about how people who are depressed, or people who are like suicidal, their life has become so complex that they just cannot handle that complexity. And usually you keep on ignoring things until they become so big that now you just cannot get away with it anymore. And then now it feels like a impossible task. So this exercise helps you uh, deal with it before it gets out of hand.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah. Or if it's already at that point, to get somewhere to start.
yeah, man, yes. Now I'm realizing so many things that are about to get out of control. Okay. Then he talks about human beings as a navigators in the world, uh, and how to organize your life so that things work out for the best. Uh, so navigation, like what is navigation all about? You are at some point number A, and then you want to go to some point number B, and then you have to chart out a course from A to B. So that's what navigation is all about. So first he talks about where you are and challenges around that. So you and the challenges around that is you subconsciously may not want to even know where you are, uh, because where you are may not be a pretty place. Like it's not easier for you to admit your issues and your incompetencies, and it also goes to your identity. And I think this problem primarily comes when you are in a place where you don't want to be. You have a certain kind of identity that I am certain kind of person. Uh, I am, let's just say, someone who is interested into music. So that's where I built my identity. And now I want to do something else, or I no longer care about that. But everyone knows me as that thing. So I just don't want to admit that it's time for me to just clean it up and pick up other things and move forward with my life. So you just don't want to even admit that. And yes, I think that's a big problem. And then he goes into how if there are things that are bothering you that are more than 18 months old, then that means you have not handled them, or you have not um,
Process them.
yep. And when you do that, he talks about how stress temporarily goes up, then it goes down. So uh, you have to a certain extent, be willing to suffer and go through that initial hurdle. Okay, so that's where you are. So once you figure out where you are, and he does have an exercise for that, which is about, and you just don't want to admit things that you have done in the past because they are so horrible. So he talks about how you are supposed to come up with 6 epochs in your life and what happened positively and negatively. And you made the point that that's the past authoring exercise.
Program. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So where are you going? So you are supposed to come up with a goal, right? So the issue with coming up with a goal is, if you don't know where your goal is, then you just don't know where your goal is. You are not uh, waking up every day, and you don't have to work hard to get there. And if you don't have any goal, you don't know when you are not on track, because both of those things are
Mm.
enormously hard to do. So it's best, like, then not to have any goal at all, in that sense, because you why would you want to take all that pain? But then he talks about the same thing as about, like, why do you want to define a goal, and when you define it, why do you want it to be the best goal that you can define? And The rationale he gives for that is because alternative would be that eventually you will suffer, and if you have a goal, then you have something. It's the same thing that Viktor Frankl talked about, that a man who has a why to live will bear anyhow. So once you have that goal that is like so high that you just always striving for it, that makes all that suffering maybe not meaningful, but you can bear it because you have something to look forward to.
Mm, mm. Yeah, and also when you get closer to the goal, you get incentive reward. So you get some positive emotion when you get closer to the goal. So and I guess that's like it feels meaningful in that sense. So you create. I would say you create meaning uh, by defining a goal or choosing a goal.
Yeah, exactly, like that. Yes, he talks about this a lot, about how when you are pursuing that goal, it's the pursuit or it's the process you should focus on, because once you do that goal, it's over. Like then you will need a new set of goals, um,
Mm,
right?
mm,
And this is a very interesting kind of pleasure that you get from pursuing your goals. I would say it's much better than watching movies or just uh, indulging into like hedonistic pleasures like eating good food, even though those are like okay, fine things, but those are not the only things you want to do, because when you are pursuing these goals, you why are you pursuing them? Because you are not already there, and uh, pursuing them will allow you to reinvent yourself, because uh, you are always like looking up, and you're always like lacking something to achieve that goal, so you will continuously need to make yourself better, and come up with all these challenges, and you'll be continuously upgrading yourself. So not only you are getting that pleasure of actually making progress towards your goal, you are also getting to improve yourself, and putting yourself in a better position to deal with the reality. So it that's a different
mm.
kind of fulfillment. So
Yeah,
but it does it does take like it does take a lot of discipline and a lot of hard work, and you tend to default back to your the easiest thing you can do. For example, it is so easy to you can drink, you can take drugs, you can masturbate, you can do all these things to get that same dopamine high, without having to work on this script for like next 3 hours, because it's not you are not always motivated to pursue your goals, and you don't always enjoy it. There might be a phase where you just supposed to learn these difficult things that you need to uh, go after your goals, and learning them can be enormously hard for a certain duration of time until it gets more fun. So uh, again, that goes back to his Cain and Abel story about how much you are willing to sacrifice, and how high quality of sacrifice that you are willing to make.
yeah.
Mhm. So once you have there's another exercise here, which is about sitting down and justifying your existence. Uh, so yeah, that was really funny.
Mm. Yeah, to define a life plan, right, or a plan for the next
Mhm.
3 or 5 years. So that's the future authoring program.
That wow, this This was also an interesting point, that what happens if you don't know where you are going. And this is like the story of Apple, where, before Steve Jobs came, where the CEO said like something like Apple is like a ship that has got this big hole at the bottom, and it's probably going to sink or something, and I'm just here to point it into the right direction. So if you don't have any goals, if you don't know where you are going, then um, there is a certain degree of stress that comes with it, because you feel like you're just not in control of your life. And then you are and there is no one single uh, part of you. He talks about how you have got these sub personalities. Some part of you wants to just eat, some part of you just wants to have sex, some part of you just wants to watch movies, some part of you just wants to do this or do that. So they're always like fighting for control, and that's what they would be doing, and it will be total chaos, because
Mm.
there is no king at the top who kind of makes a structure out of the whole thing. So he talks about who should be that king, who should be at the top, and it should be the thing that pays attention and learns. So I believe you have something to say about that, right?
No, I just you explained it very well. So yeah, but
Okay, and
I like the idea because it's a good thing to think about.
yeah, and this is the thing that allows you to fight your maybe certain kind of impulses, because once you have that
Yeah.
goal, like oh man, we have run out of water, you're like, fine, I'm still going. Like I have experienced that. uh, I have when I was training for marathon, I would just go out in the like when the sun was really hot, and I'll just train, and um, someone asked me, why would you go out in the middle of the day? Like, why can't you train when it's early morning, or late night, or evening, when it is more comfortable and the weather is good? Uh, why do you want to put yourself through all that heat? Because in my part of India, it can get really hot at times. So, and it makes no sense otherwise. Like, why would you put yourself through all that pain? It just goes against like, by default I just would want to be as comfortable as I can. So this is very true, that once you have a certain goal, uh, the sub personality of you, which is in charge of that goal, will just become so powerful that it is able to just override all these other personality, and just all of them just like fall in line. Like, you are eating the kind of stuff that you otherwise would never eat. You are sleeping on time, you are having all that discipline. So yes, I have seen that. I have seen that when there is a king at top, uh, these other personalities just fall in line.
Yeah, yeah. But it's not a very easy thing to do to make the other sub personalities listen to that king. So it's something you really need to you need to practice that to make it work if you're not used to it.
That is the exercise, because
Mm.
uh, there it's the same thing about going back to the relationship discussion we were having. Why people don't take out time to improve these things. um, I lost that thought. I lost. I cannot believe. Uh, I cannot believe I lost it. Yes, yes, yes. So. it's something like your relationship is working out, and it's working out on an average level, and so now that can be a tragedy for you, because it was some there was some Dalai Lama quote about how um, a misfortune of getting what you want or something like that. So and I have experienced that, because whenever I had this one personality that becomes the king, when it wants to achieve something, everything else just goes away, like they just fall in line like good troops.
Mm.
So that has always happened with me, and I
Okay,
felt
that's good.
yeah, but uh, life being what it is, I reached a point where that was no longer happening for me. uh,
Mm.
Maybe
Mm.
because of certain mistakes I made, certain, maybe, got into certain things that I shouldn't. uh, um, Sometimes you are the villain of your own story, so that was no longer happening for me, and now I have to contend with this problem that even if there is some personality at the top, nobody listens to it.
Mm. Mm.
uh, and you are that's a and if you don't have the experience of going through that from a very early age, you have to invent all that structure of actually solving this problem that you never had to solve before.
Yeah. Mm. Yeah, it's kind of the same for me. That I it used to be much easier, but now it's not as easy anymore.
Yeah,
So yeah.
yeah.
Mm.
I wonder what is the cause for that. Maybe it's maybe, lot of they say a lot of changes happens in the brain between 20 and 30, uh,
Mm.
like all of these neurons, they are pruning or something like that. I don't know, I mean, uh, it feels, um, it might have something to do with the age, because I can pinpoint the age like 24 or 25. uh, Around that time the momentum began to shift. uh,
Mm.
I can just pinpoint that, hey, there you go. It was around that time things beginning to uh, not just work by default.
Mm. Yeah, I think for me it was when I finished studying. So
Hmm.
uh, when I finished studying full time, and that was like 3 years ago. So yeah, also the same age.
Okay.
um, but then the problem was that I had a goal, but I didn't know how to get there. So before it was very easy, but then I didn't really have a good plan. So that I think that's the cause of the problem for me.
Yeah. We'll probably shouldn't get into that, or what? Yes.
No, I have to leave right now, or like in at least in a few minutes. So did you have some more exercise?
Yes, I do have
Uh,
more exercises. Yes.
okay, so we can go through them and then finish.
Okay. So, but then I have to put those exercises in a context as well.
Mm, mm, yeah.
Yeah. So if you leave, I'll just keep going and finish all the exercises. And um,
Okay.
mhm.
Yeah. Okay. Well. Okay. Then I'll leave now.
Okay.
Okay. But it was a good discussion, and I think it's also good to have it this short, because then if people want to listen to it, then they will. It's good for it's possible for them to do it. Okay. So bye.
Bye. Hmm. Okay, so I'll go through the next takeaway. So the next thing he spoke about was how do you define a goal? Um, and the one advice around that is don't have the goal that is too vague, because then the difference between which objects are the tools and which are the obstacles and which objects are irrelevant is not that clear. And why we are talking about these three things is because he talks about how the moment you define a goal for yourself, uh, as far as your perception is concerned, all the objects falls into three categories at that point. One are the things that you can use to achieve your goals, which are the tools, and then the obstacles, things that get in your way, and after that there are irrelevant things. uh, so one of the things we were thinking was, what if there are some things that you are considering irrelevant, but they are having the key to the problem you are trying to solve. And Netha was saying that if uh, if those things are falling into irrelevant categories when they shouldn't, so maybe there is something wrong with the goal that you have defined, and maybe you should clarify it. And another idea, or I should say exercise, was that how about you do an experiment where you poke at these you first intelligently like try to guess which of these irrelevant things might be useful, then you, as an experiment with an explorer's mind, try to poke at these things to see maybe there is something there. uh, okay, so uh, this is the future authoring exercise. So you are supposed to come up with your goals in next 3 to 5 years, and then come up with a plan to pursue them. So the next point he covered was how to navigate. Uh, and one of the things he discussed while navigating was, let's just say you are pursuing your goal, and you run into an anomaly. And so anomaly is the thing that you did not, you are not like competent enough to deal with, and you did not foresee that it will be happening, but it just happens, and it like totally wipes you out. So you'll probably, if that anomaly doesn't kill you, you probably will wish that you were dead. So that's how hard it is. And he was talking about how you can use that anomaly uh, to put yourself in formation with this new information. So his idea there is that there are times, part of why you this might happen to you is some part of you actually might be aiming for the failure, or self destruction. So uh, so some one of the sub personalities is actually working towards your own demise. So the exercise around that is try to find out, do some introspection and try to find out the a part of you that is aiming for the worst things, and try to clean them up. And the second exercise on how to avoid the catastrophic failures uh, is be aware and notice things. When things go even a little bit wrong, you try to fix them. So this way you are able to have uh, in a way thousands of micro deaths and recovery, rather than waiting for that big event that will like totally wipe you out. Then he finally gets into a story of the flood. So in a psychological sense, he talks about how the reason of the flood could be uh, your own sinful nature. Uh, and there are two types of sins there. One is that you are doing things that you know yourself to be wrong, and another one is you are failing to do things that you know you should do, things that you know are right by your own definition of things. Uh, so this exercise is about assuming that there is a mysterious flood or a being that will wipe you out if you continue to act this way. And the exercises with around that is find out things that you know are wrong, but you still do them. And then you try to stop every day. Like maybe you start small and over time you stop them completely. And then find out things that you know are right, but you don't do them. And you try to do them more often. Uh, so the last exercise is you try to predict what major flood can wipe you out. Like what are the things that you have ignored for so long that they have become so big. You start preparing to avoid it, and you try to put yourself together. So those are that's all. So that's all for now.